2020 has been a year of disappointments. And while most of these have been brought on by this whole global pandemic that we're living through, one of my biggest disappointments of the year is a show that most have already entirely forgotten. Westworld has been declining in quality for a while now, and it saddens me. How did a show so praised for its ambitious plot and spectacular performances become so mediocre? So today, I hope to answer the question, what happened to Westworld? Before I begin, there is obviously going to be spoilers for all seasons of Westworld. Alright, let's go. The Westworld TV show began its life as a 1973 film of the same name, written and directed by Michael Crichton, who you probably know better for his later and more famous work, Jurassic Park. Flash forward 40 years, and in 2013 it was announced that HBO had greenlit a pilot for a Westworld TV series, to be written and directed by husband and wife team Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy. Production began in 2014, and in October of 2016, the first season of HBO's Westworld premiered to critical acclaim. I personally feel that Westworld's first season is a near-perfect season of television. It functions as its own complete self-contained story, and when I tell friends about the show, I usually only recommend these first 10 episodes. There's this genre bend of sci-fi and western that really feels fresh and unique. The central mystery comes together in a satisfying and spectacular way, the cast performances are outstanding, and I listen to the soundtrack probably at least once a month. But I'm not the only one who thinks this highly of Westworld Season 1. Westworld has the most watched first season of any HBO original series since True Detective. This was a pretty big deal, and there was even some speculation that Westworld could become HBO's big cash cow after the forthcoming end of Game of Thrones. All this is to say that Westworld built up a lot of hype, and there was much anticipation to see what would happen in the second season. Season 2 premiered in April of 2018, and was once again largely received positively, but the cracks were starting to show. While Season 1 keeps you hooked with the central mystery of the maze, Season 2 tries to replicate this with the door, and the sublime, and the forge, and the valley beyond. There's too many things. To complicate things even further, Season 2 has this extremely confusing non-linear plot structure that seemingly tries to one-up the plot structure of Season 1. And while none of this makes the show unwatchable, the second season is far less engaging, less nuanced, and less cohesive than the first. After 2 long years of production, Westworld Season 3 finally premiered in March of 2020 to a resounding meh. There was no intense outrage like that which came with the end of Game of Thrones. There were no fan petitions, no calls for a redo, just a sort of disappointed but not surprised reaction, followed by the show very quickly fading into obscurity. While Season 1 and 2 both averaged 1.5 million views per episode, Season 3 averaged around 900,000 views. Season 3 also contains the 3 lowest rated episodes of the show to date. All this is to say less people are watching Westworld than ever before, and less people think Westworld is worth watching than ever before. So what went wrong? Perhaps the most noticeable problem with Westworld's third season is with the characters. To put it bluntly, the new characters suck, and the old characters have become just hollow shells of what they once were. And all of these characters have sort of half-baked motivations. And none of them exemplify this quite as well as Maeve. Much like Dolores, Maeve's character arc in the first season was about gaining consciousness and finally expressing her own free will, and this begins with her having flashbacks of a daughter that she had in a previous storyline, and culminates with her choosing to stay in the park against her programming to find said daughter. Season 2 picks up right where we left off, and after finding her host daughter, Maeve is devastated to learn that she's been reset and assigned to a new host mother. But despite the fact that their relationship was fabricated, the love that Maeve feels for her daughter is still very much real, and in the season finale, she dies to ensure that her daughter makes it to the digital heaven that is the sublime. This seems to me that this would be the natural conclusion of Maeve's story, having gone from unconscious robot brothel owner to compassionate, caring mother. And because of this, her inclusion in Season 3 seems entirely unjustified. She spends most of the season being strung along by Sarek, the big bad of this season, under the promise that he can reunite her with her daughter in the sublime. But by Season 3, this motivation no longer makes sense. If Maeve's character arc was about waking up and breaking free of human control, shouldn't letting go of the daughter that was assigned to her by the human oppressors be an important part of that arc? But, of course, Maeve isn't the only character that feels out of place here. Bernard spends most of the season talking to himself in diagnostic mode, Sirach's motivation is entirely surface level, and Stubbs has absolutely no reason to be in the season other than to make good on the tease in the Season 2 finale that he was a host. In fact, Hector and Lee and young William and Arnold's wife all have no narrative purpose, and this leads me to believe that they were only included for the sake of fan service. One of the most talked about elements of early Westworld was the plot twists, and by extension, the narrative's non-linear timeline. And rightfully so. In Season 1, these elements work well in advancing the story in interesting and unexpected ways. But in Season 2, the plot twists are convoluted, and the non-linear timeline takes more away from the show than it adds. Let me dive a little deeper into that. Season 1 has a plot structure that involves two different timelines, playing out simultaneously on screen, but actually happening 30 years apart. And the thing is, up until the season finale, we don't know this. And this is why the Man in Black twist works so well. The viewer is led to believe that William and the Man in Black are different people visiting the park at the same time, and once the twist is revealed, we realize that they are the same person, visiting the park at different times. In this scene, Dolores works as a stand-in for the audience. It's not until she realizes who the Man in Black is that the audience does as well. And after that, she does what we knew she would do from the beginning. She breaks free of human control, and the robot uprising begins. So we've got a plot twist that results from a non-linear timeline being presented through a character who, like the audience, is not in on the twist. Now, the real interesting thing here is that Season 2 does the exact same thing. This time, the character standing in for the audience is Bernard, in two different timelines that are playing out 2 weeks apart. One is directly following the events that ended Season 1 in the Dolores Revolution timeline, and the other takes place 2 weeks later after Bernard has had his memory wiped and wakes up on a beach in the Strand timeline. The twist in the Season 2 finale is that for the entirety of the Strand timeline, Charlotte Hale has actually been a host body, inhabited by Dolores. So, if these two seasons use the same plot structure, why does one work while the other doesn't? Well, in Season 2, we know from the beginning that there's two timelines, because there's two versions of Bernard. For one, this creates a lot of confusion trying to figure out when things are happening and makes Bernard's story really hard to follow. And two, it diminishes the twist itself. Not knowing that there was two timelines playing out in Season 1 isn't just what allowed for the twist to work, it is part of the twist. The two timelines are hidden in plain sight throughout the season, in these otherwise confusing scenes of Dolores kind of wandering off on her own, but upon a second viewing it becomes obvious that these are happening in the present. The Man in Black twist also serves an important purpose. For one, it shows us both what happened to William and how the Man in Black became who he is, all at once. And it's also the culmination of Dolores' journey to the center of the maze. This is the moment where she finally remembers her past and becomes fully conscious. Let's get back to Season 3. Prior to its airing, the showrunner said that they would be toning down some of the show's more confusing elements after backlash from critics, but instead swung so far in the other direction that Season 3 just feels boring and uninspired. There's no real season finale twist, and nearly all of the plot points are either entirely predictable or wildly out of left field. As far as I can see, a lot of this can be chalked up to fan service. The show's creators noticed that the plot twists were some of the most talked about elements of the show, without really understanding why, and simply gave us more of what they thought the fans wanted. Complete, unexpected surprise. In my opinion, there seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding of what made the first season of Westworld such a critical success. It wasn't just the park, or the maze, or the twists, or the characters, or the themes of free will and control. It was all these things working together to form a greater story. The showrunners have said before that they have always intended for their story to eventually leave the park, and this gave me a glimmer of hope because it led me to believe that they too realized that Westworld is more than the sum of its parts. But now that the story has left the park, it's unclear where the show is headed now. It's no secret that Jonathan Nolan loves to troll the Westworld subreddit theorists, and while I'm sure this is great fun for him, I think it's a serious detriment to the show. At a convention panel in March of 2017, during the writing stage of production on Season 2, long before the season had been shot, let alone released, Jonathan Nolan said that they were changing the script for Season 2, Episode 3, because Reddit users had correctly guessed the twist. This is completely baffling to me, that because a few fans online have figured out the show, they changed the entire thing. I really struggle to understand how this helps in any way. If someone guessing the twist means you've done an adequate job of structuring the series, why the heck would you change it?
If you've planned your book that the butler did it, and then you read on the internet, someone has figured out that the butler did it, and you suddenly change in midstream and it was the chambermaid who did it, then you screw up the whole book.
Back in 2016, before the show premiered, it was reported that production on season 1 had shut down to allow for more time to perfect the final episodes of the season. In talking about this temporary hiatus, James Marsden, who plays Teddy, said that this was not just about getting the first 10 episodes done, but about mapping out the next 5 to 6 years of the series. But after season 3, the showrunners clarified that while they do have a broader idea of the beginning, middle, and end of the series, they've never actually talked about the number of seasons the show will run. They also said that they vastly underestimated just how difficult it would be to make a show of this scale, and how long each season would take to produce. Season 3 of Westworld might have been a letdown, but unlike Game of Thrones, this isn't over yet. The question now is, where do we go from here? And my honest answer is, I don't know. I don't think that the tone and quality of Westworld's first season can ever be replicated with the same effectiveness, but I don't think that means the show is doomed to a disappointing ending. Making a TV show is really hard, and making a great TV show that runs for multiple seasons and comes together in the end cohesively is nearly impossible. And I'm not going to pretend like I could do better, because I know for sure I couldn't. All I can do is keep watching, and hope that season 4 doesn't suck.